I woke up to the sound of my daughter's voice, asking a doctor how long it would take. Not how long I'd take to recover, how long the paperwork would take. That's the moment I understood everything, and it cost my family every single thing they thought they'd already won. My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 61 years old. I live in a town called Brevard, North Carolina, up in the mountains outside Asheville, in a stone and cedar house I built with my own two hands, starting back in 1998. I own a company called Callahan Timber and Millwork. Started it out of a rented barn with one used bandsaw and a loan from my father-in-law that I paid back in 14 months flat. By last year, we had 31 employees, contracts with 3 regional home builders, and a reputation good enough that people drove 2 hours just to buy from us instead of the big box stores. My wife, Diane, is 58. We've been married for 33 years. My son, Wyatt, is 30, and he's held the title of operations manager at my company for 4 years now, though what that mostly means is he shows up around 10, leaves by 4, and calls it delegating. My daughter, Faith, is 27. She lives in Asheville proper, works at some marketing agency, and calls me when her car needs work or her rent's short. And then there's Trent, my stepson, 34. Diane had Trent when she was 19, with a man named Curtis Boyle who left before Trent turned 2 and never once sent a birthday card. I met Diane when Trent was 5 years old, at a church picnic of all places, and I fell for her so hard and so fast my own mother told me to slow down. I didn't listen. We got married the following spring. I raised that boy like he came out of me, coached his little league team, walked him through his first heartbreak, paid for community college when the 4-year schools didn't work out, never adopted him formally, because Curtis was still breathing somewhere in Tennessee and Diane didn't want the legal mess, but I never once treated Trent like anything other than my own son. I made him head of purchasing 3 years ago, trusted him with vendor relationships, with pricing, with the checkbook when I traveled. I'll come back to him. I'll come back to all of them. It was a Thursday in September when my life folded in half. I'd been up at the mill since 6, walking the new kiln we'd just installed, checking moisture readings, the kind of tedious work that keeps a business alive but never makes anybody's highlight reel. I left the yard around 7:30 that evening, tired in that bone-deep way you get after a 60-hour week. I remember the sun was doing that low orange thing it does over the Pisgah ridgeline in early fall. I remember reaching for my coffee thermos on the passenger seat. I don't remember the truck that crossed the center line on Highway 64. They told me later it was a deer, that the other driver swerved to miss it and never regained control. Hit me head-on doing 60. The jaws of life got me out. A trauma helicopter got me to Mission Hospital in 19 minutes, which the doctors said was the only reason I was still breathing. I surfaced, partially, 4 days later, and for a long time after, I wished to God I hadn't. Because here's what nobody tells you about being that kind of unconscious. It isn't peaceful. It isn't dark and quiet like a good night's sleep. It's more like drowning slowly in a room where everyone thinks you've already gone under. You hear the machines. You hear footsteps. You hear every single word anyone says 2 feet from your face, and you can't so much as twitch a finger to let them know you're still in there. Mission Hospital, ICU, 4th floor. I know because I heard an orderly say it to another orderly while he mopped near my bed. The first real conversation I understood was between a doctor and Diane. Day 4, late afternoon, I think, because the light through my eyelids had that flat gray quality. He's showing some improved reflex response, the doctor said. But a brain injury this severe, we genuinely don't know what recovery looks like. It could be weeks. It could be a plateau we don't come back from. And if he plateaus? Diane asked, calm, steady, like she was asking about a weather forecast. Then we'd need to talk seriously about goals of care. Whether to continue aggressive treatment or shift toward comfort measures. What's the timeline on that conversation? That was Trent. His voice had a clip to it I didn't recognize, something efficient and cold that I'd never once heard him use with me. There's no fixed timeline, the doctor said. It depends on how he responds. A pause. And then Diane said the thing that split my chest wide open. He always told me he never wanted to be kept alive on machines. If his heart stops, I don't want you to bring him back. I want to sign the DNR now so we're not scrambling later. I never said that. Not once. Not to her. Not to anyone. In 33 years of marriage. That's exactly what he'd want, Trent added, fast, like he'd been waiting for his cue. He told me the same thing, actually, at the lake house last summer. Said he'd rather go than be a vegetable burdening everybody. I have never in my life used the word vegetable to describe a human being. I have never talked to Trent about dying at any lake house, because we don't own a lake house. He's 61, Diane said to the doctor. He's had a wonderful, full life. He built something incredible. He wouldn't want to be remembered lying here for months. 61 is a full life. My wife of 33 years said that sentence out loud, in a hospital room, 2 feet from my body, in the same tone she'd used to describe a car that had finally given out. I heard the pen, that specific plastic click of a cap coming off. She signed the DNR order right there at my bedside, and I lay there and listened to my own death being pre-approved. And I made myself a promise. Don't move. Don't react. Don't let them know. They all came back together that night. I heard the door, the scrape of the visitor chairs, the crinkle of a granola bar wrapper, which I'd bet money was Wyatt because Wyatt is always eating something. Faith spoke first. He looks the same. I thought he'd look different. Stable, Diane said. Doctor says maybe another week, could be longer. Another week. Faith exhaled, and it wasn't a sad sound. It was an inconvenienced one. I've got the Hendricks campaign due Friday. I can't keep driving out here every other day, Mom. Nobody's asking you to move in, Wyatt said. I'm just saying I have a life, Faith snapped. He missed my entire senior year with the mill expansion. Every single event. Now I'm supposed to rearrange everything? She wasn't entirely wrong. I'd missed things. I built something for them, all of them, and building takes hours you don't get back. Trent spoke next, that measured, boardroom voice of his. He made it pretty clear he doesn't want to be a burden. I think we honor that. Exactly, Wyatt said. Then, quieter, like he thought the machines would swallow it. Once probate clears, my share of the company vests. I looked at the trust documents in his office last spring. I know what I'm getting. Wyatt. Diane's voice, sharp. Not here. What? I'm just saying it out loud for once. Silence. My 30-year-old son had gone through my private files and had already penciled my death onto some internal calendar of his, a line item, a vesting date, while I lay 3 feet away with a tube down my throat. I don't have words for what that does to a man. I won't pretend I do. Over the following days, I heard things I will carry to my grave. I heard Trent on the phone in the hallway, thinking I was too far gone to register any of it. Yeah, doesn't look good. Listen, has that lot on Lake Toxaway sold yet? I might have capital freeing up soon. Capital. Freeing up. From his father. I heard Faith tell Diane that the house on Deerfield Ridge was way too much house for one widow to rattle around in, that she should think about something smaller once things settled. Once things settled. Like I was weather passing through. And I heard Trent, quiet, efficient Trent, the boy I coached and clothed and put through school, the man I made head of purchasing, tell Diane, and these are close to his exact words, that the sooner the estate settled, the cleaner the transition would be at the mill, that he already knew every vendor contract and every account number, that he could run it without missing a beat. I know where everything is, Trent. I just bet you do. Day 8. I opened my eyes. A nurse gasped and hit the call button so hard I heard it crack against the wall. There was noise and light that felt like a physical blow, and the sudden scramble of people who hadn't expected to be celebrating that morning. The doctor ran through his questions. What year is it? Who's the president? Squeeze my hand. I answered everything correctly, every single time. When Diane walked through the door 20 minutes later, her face did something I've thought about every day since. There was real relief in it. I have to be fair and say that. But underneath the relief, for less than a second, something else moved across her expression before she caught it. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. She hugged me. She cried real tears. She said, "I've been so scared. I couldn't breathe." I held her back and said, "I know. I'm just glad I'm still here with you." Every word out of my mouth was a lie, and for the first time in 33 years of marriage, that didn't bother me one bit. They discharged me 2 days later. Wyatt drove me home and made small talk about football the entire way. Faith had left flowers on the kitchen table, purple ones, which she knows I've always been mildly allergic to, but I thanked her anyway. Trent met me at the door and shook my hand with both of his and said, "Welcome home." We were all worried sick. I smiled at every one of them. I told them I was grateful, and underneath that smile, I had never in my life felt so completely, coldly awake. There's a particular kind of silence that surrounds a man who knows a secret nobody realizes he's carrying. I lived inside that silence for almost 5 weeks. I told everyone I was still foggy, still getting headaches, still not sharp enough to go back to running the mill. Diane accepted that instantly, which told me exactly how closely she'd actually been paying attention to me the last several years. Wyatt nodded along and went back to whatever Wyatt did with his afternoons, which, from what I could tell, mostly involved a golf simulator app on his phone. Faith checked in with a text every few days. Trent told me not to think about work at all, that he had everything handled at the mill. I told him, "Thank you, son." The word tasted like drywall dust in my mouth. The first call I made was to a lawyer, and not the one who'd handled our family's paperwork for 20 years. A man named Gary Pruitt, who I now suspected had been having entirely too many friendly lunches with Diane. I called a woman named Renata Cole instead, referred by an old supplier friend 2 counties over. Her office was above a hardware store in Hendersonville. No fancy waiting room, no need for one. She had a handshake like a closing argument. I sat down and told her I needed to know if my family was robbing me, and I needed her to start from the assumption that they were. She didn't blink. "Then let's find out for sure," she said. The second call went to a private investigator, a retired state trooper named Dale Osgood, who worked out of a converted garage in Fletcher and drove a truck so ordinary it practically disappeared. I told him about the hospital room, about Trent and the lot on Lake Toxaway, about Trent's "I know where everything is," about the sound of my wife's pen. Dale wrote everything down in slow, careful print and asked exactly one question. "How long you two been married?" 33 years. He nodded once and kept writing. The following week, Renata called and told me to sit down before I read anything in the folder on her desk. It was thick, easily 200 pages. "Your head of purchasing," she said, "has been running inflated invoices through a shell vendor for at least 2.5 years. The total came to just under $410,000, moved through a company called Boyle Reclaimed Supply, registered to an LLC in Delaware, named, I later learned, after Trent's own biological father, in some twisted little private joke I still can't fully process. He's your stepson?" Renata said. It wasn't quite a question. Yes. Internal messages we recovered suggest his reasoning was that he needed to, quote, "protect his own position, since he's not blood, in case the will ever got contested." I'd co-signed his first car loan. I'd walked him down the aisle at his own wedding because his father couldn't be bothered to show. I'd told that boy to his face more times than I can count, "You're my son, full stop, no asterisk." And he'd been quietly draining my company for years anyway. "There's more," Renata said, "and there always is. Your wife authorized 8 of these transactions personally. She has signing power on the operating account. Some of this could not have moved without her signature. My wife hadn't just told a doctor to let me die. She'd been actively signing off on her son robbing the company I'd built from a rented barn. Dale Osgood called 2 days after that. I was out on my back deck watching the mist sit low over the ridge when my phone buzzed. "You want the personal stuff now?" he asked. "Say it." Guy's name is Marcus Doyle, 36. Runs a CrossFit gym off Cayuga Road. Your wife's been going there for 16 months. It's not casual, Robert. There's a hotel involved. Regular Tuesdays. I did the math without wanting to. 16 months earlier, we'd gone to a fall festival together, and Diane had worn a green dress, and we'd slow danced badly to a cover band butchering an old country song, and she'd kissed me and told me this was going to be a good year for us. 3 weeks later, she'd signed up for a gym membership. I set the phone down on the railing and stared at the mist until my hands stopped shaking. I didn't scream. I wanted to. I wanted to put my fist through the porch railing. Instead, I made myself breathe, slow and even, until the wave passed. If I fell apart now, they wouldn't just take my company. They'd win outright. Keep moving. Robert. There was one more thread to pull. I reached out to a bookkeeper named Priya Anand, who'd worked in our accounts department for 7 years before Wyatt had her demoted over what he called a personality conflict, which really meant she'd corrected his math in front of a vendor once, and he never forgave her for it. Priya met me at a diner off Main Street in Brevard, ordered black coffee, and was already looking at me like a woman who'd been rehearsing this conversation for a long time. I flagged those vendor invoices twice, she said before I even sat down. Wyatt told me to drop it, but it wasn't Wyatt running it. It was Trent. And your daughter. My cup stopped halfway to my mouth. Faith? Trent's been cutting monthly checks straight to her marketing firm, dressed up as a consulting retainer. She figured out what he and your wife were doing about a year ago. Instead of coming to you, she asked for a monthly cut to stay quiet. She'd been funding her entire lifestyle off money stolen from her own father. Priya slid a flash drive across the table, and over the next 10 days she became my inside source, matching every transaction, every date, every signature, building a timeline with the kind of precision that only comes from someone who'd been waiting years to finally be believed. By the end of 5 weeks, here's what sat in my file. Diane, an affair spanning 16 months, co-signed on Trent's fraud 8 separate times, told a doctor to let her husband die. Trent, over $400,000 stolen across 2.5 years, funneled through a shell company named for the father who abandoned him, and he still told the doctor I didn't want to be revived. Wyatt. No knowledge of the fraud or the affair, but sat in my hospital room discussing vesting schedules and lake lots while I lay there dying, and told the doctor I didn't want to be a burden. Faith, aware of the theft for a full year, took a monthly bribe to stay silent, and told a doctor her father had missed her whole life and it wasn't worth showing up for now. Renata had the lawsuit to freeze the fraudulent transfers and file the criminal complaint ready and waiting in a drawer. I cleared out our joint savings, just under $600,000 that Diane assumed I never checked, and moved every cent of it, completely legally, my money and my signature, into an account at a bank 40 minutes away that none of them had ever heard of. I had a new will drafted. The old one had been generous. This one was going to teach a lesson. Our 33rd anniversary was 6 days out. Diane mentioned it cheerfully at dinner one night, reached across the table and squeezed my hand, said we should do something special this year. I told her, absolutely, let's invite everyone we know. Make it a real celebration. She smiled like a woman with nothing at all to hide. She planned the whole thing herself. Invitations went to 18 neighbors from up and down Deerfield Ridge, our pastor from First Baptist, old friends from the mill's early years. She hired catering out of Asheville, real linens, a rented arch strung with string lights over the back patio. I found the banner rolled up on the kitchen counter 3 days before, 33 years, the Callahan family, and I stood there staring at it long enough that Diane asked if I was feeling dizzy again. The party fell on a Saturday evening in late October, the mountain air finally cool enough to stand outside comfortably after months of humidity. Our yard glowed with lights strung through the dogwoods. Wyatt arrived first, dressed like he was headed to a golf resort, clapped me on the shoulder, and told me I looked like I'd bounced right back. Faith came in behind him with a card that said, "So glad you're still with us, love you always." And I looked at her handwriting and thought about a little girl who used to fall asleep in my truck on the drive home from soccer practice, and wondered exactly where that girl had gone. Trent arrived last, the way he always does, wearing a blazer he didn't need, shook my hand with both of his and said, 33 years? That's really something, Dad. I told him it really was. I told him I had a gift for everyone tonight. He laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. By 8 the yard was full and loud, glasses clinking, neighbors laughing under the string lights. Diane moved through the crowd in that green dress again, smiling her public smile like a woman with a spotless conscience. Renata Cole was parked 2 streets over in an unmarked car with a folder on the passenger seat. Dale Osgood had made one final phone call that afternoon. 2 Transylvania County deputies sat waiting in a plain sedan down the block. I walked to the center of the patio, picked up a fork, and tapped my glass until the whole yard went quiet. 33 years, I began. That's a long time to build something together. You sacrifice, you work, you trust that it's all worth it in the end. Someone in the crowd murmured agreement. Nearly dying, I continued, has a way of clarifying exactly what's worth it and what isn't. When I was lying in that ICU bed at Mission Hospital, I had nothing to do but listen, and I heard everything. Diane's smile stayed fixed, but something behind her eyes shifted, and I watched her feel the temperature of the whole yard drop. I reached down to the table and picked up 4 envelopes, each one with a name written in my own hand. Wyatt stepped forward first, still holding his bourbon, wearing the easy smile of a man expecting a bonus check. He opened his envelope and read. Inside was a printed transcript of every word he'd said in that hospital room, the vesting comment, the lake lot, I know what I'm getting, followed by a termination letter from Callahan Timber and Millwork, effective that midnight, his company truck to be returned by Monday. I let it sit, and in the new will, I told him, you get exactly $1,000. Consider it seed capital for that lake lot. Faith walked over slower, arms already crossed, took her envelope like it might bite her. Inside, her section of the transcript, he missed my whole senior year. Why should I show up now? And beneath it, printed hospital security footage time-stamped the exact hour she'd told the doctor her father's life wasn't worth extending. And underneath that, Priya's ledger, highlighted, showing 11 monthly payments from a shell account into her firm. Dad, I can explain, she started. You can, I said, my voice steady. But you already had the chance to. A year ago. And you chose a monthly check instead. Your name comes off the lease on your apartment as of Monday. And the same as your brother. $1,000. Spend it however conscience allows. Diane hadn't moved. The whole yard had gone still, the Hendersons from 2 doors down staring at their shoes, our pastor looking like a man reconsidering every choice that led him into this backyard. She set her drink down with exaggerated care, walked over, and opened her envelope with both hands. Inside, Dale's surveillance report, 16 months of dates, the gym on Cayuga Road, the hotel off Highway 25. Beneath that, the 8 fraudulent authorizations, her signature, next to numbers she'd sworn she'd never seen. And beneath all of it, divorce papers, already filed, already processed. She went white, not tearful, not yet, just pale in that specific way that means the body understands something before the mind can catch up. Robert, please, she said, glancing at the neighbors, at the banner over our heads. 33 years, I said quietly, and you couldn't manage to wait 6 more days. You told a doctor I'd had a full life at 61. You signed away $400,000 of a company I built out of a rented barn. I never raised my voice, not once that whole night. I didn't need to. My settlement offer is the rental duplex we still own outside Hendersonville. You can live there, or you can let a judge spend a morning reading through your timeline instead. Your choice. Trent hadn't moved from the edge of the patio. Very still, the blazer suddenly looking like a costume 2 sizes too proud for him. I didn't hand him an envelope. I just looked at him. Your father left before you turned 2, I said. I married your mother when you were 5, and I never once treated you like anything less than mine. I coached you. I walked you down the aisle. I made you head of purchasing and trusted you with the checkbook. And for 2.5 years, you stole from me $410,000 and hid it behind your own father's last name like it was some kind of joke only you were in on. Trent's jaw tightened. Dad, whatever you think you have, I don't think, I said. I know. Renata filed the criminal complaint yesterday morning. The warrant's been signed since noon. I looked toward the gate. Hua, come on in. 2 deputies in plain clothes walked through, and the whole yard made a sound I still can't fully describe. A single collective breath pulled in at once. Someone's glass hit the flagstone and shattered. Wyatt actually stepped backward like he could put distance between himself and what was happening. One of the deputies said, Trent Boyle? Trent looked at me one final time, and something in his face cracked open, not quite remorse, more like the specific devastation of a man who'd bet his entire future on his father never waking up. You raised me like I was really yours, he said, quiet, almost a whisper. Didn't always feel that way, though. I did raise you like you were really mine, I told him. That part was never a lie. They walked him out the side gate. Diane had a hand pressed over her mouth. Wyatt was staring at his own shoes. Faith was crying, real tears this time, though I couldn't tell you honestly what they were for. I picked my glass back up, looked around at 18 stunned faces under the string lights, and told them all thank you for coming. I meant that sincerely. Please eat. The food is very good. I picked the caterer myself. A few people managed weak smiles. I finished my drink, set the glass down clean, and buttoned my jacket. 61 years old, and not one person left standing in that yard who didn't belong there. I walked through my own house and out the front door into the cool mountain night. My truck had been packed since Wednesday. I pulled out of the driveway on Deerfield Ridge for the last time, turned onto Highway 64, and headed toward Asheville with the windows down. My phone lit up once on the seat, Diane calling. I let it ring out. A few minutes later, I pulled onto the shoulder, typed one line, and sent it. I heard every word. Then I dropped the phone in the glove box and kept driving, the mountain air pouring through the cab. 33 years lighter than I'd been that morning, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, completely, quietly free.